Our preview for the 2025 Tennessee Titans, their offseason in 60 seconds. Brought in Dan Moore, there's a left tackle, 4 years, $82 million, $50 guaranteed. Signed Coney Barton at the off-ball linebacker spot, 3 years, $21 million. Signed Kevin Zeitler to be the right guard, 1 year, $9 million. Draymond Jones, outside linebacker, 1 year, $8.5 million. Brought in Tyler Lockett, 1 year, $4 million. Other signings, Xavier Woods, Sebastian Joseph Day on smaller deals. Lost Harold Landry, Nick Westbrook-Akina in free agency. Traded Kenneth Murray to the Cowboys. Draft picks, Cam Ward, first overall. Edge, Olufemi Oluwadejo, second round, 52nd overall. Safety Kevin Winston in the third round. Wide receiver Shamari Dike in the fourth round. Tight end Gunnar Helm in the fourth round. Eric Ayamanor, wide receiver in the fourth round.
You were rolling there until the end.
Was a little bit too fast. What are you excited to watch with the 2025 Tennessee Titans?
There are a handful of units that weirdly fascinate me in the NFL, and I think the Titans defense is one of them. I think Denard Wilson is a really, really good play caller. And there are some issues with this roster that we'll get to in a little bit, but I just think that some of the stuff that he was doing last year was, one, underrated, and also just really different than a lot of other teams. So just on a production standpoint, they were 17th in defensive DVOA last year and 19th in EPA per game. They were a perfectly average unit with I think 2 players that anybody knows was definitively good in their 2 defensive tackles. Those are probably, if you ask the average fan,
one was a rookie.
And one was a rookie day 2 pick who people had concerns that he would be ready day 1. It was just, this was not a team that had a super amount of talent. And so I think the fact that they produced that well was pretty impressive. What's interesting to me is not just that it was that good, and I feel like it's well coached and guys tackle and all that stuff. They coverage-wise play with a really interesting menu. Last year on first down, only the Jaguars played less cover 3 than they did. When they went single high, it was a lot of, they just played man, and they said we're just gonna run with guys, and that's gonna be it. And so they did do a lot of cover 1, but cover 3 was pretty much off the table for them. But weirdly, on third down, they turned up the cover 3 notch, and they also played a cover 0 way more than any other team in the league. And so they were just they were just calling whatever you think the standard for coverages is on X, Y, and Z down for a lot of other teams. They kind of flipped it and they made it work. It was like a bizarro funhouse mirror coverage defense, and they did a good job with it.
Offensive coaches have taught those are Rolodex defenses. It's just a Rolodex of coverage. You just kind of spin the Rolodex and you don't know what you're going to get. And it's hard to play against those teams sometimes. And I mean, obviously the Ravens come from that world where it's a lot of too high shells before the snap. You're kind of expressing into a bunch of different coverages. You're just hard to pin down. You're just a defense that's really, really hard to get a beat on. And I think that's exactly what Denard Wilson wanted to be. And you look at it, I completely agree when it comes to the personnel. This is not a team that had a lot of proven players defensively last year, and they managed to get by. And I do think that there are some elements of this where they kind of were, it was like blessing in disguise. L'Jarius Sneed getting hurt last year after what you gave up for L'Jarius Sneed sucks. But Jarvis Brownlee, who was a 5th-round pick for them last year, got to play a bunch, and he took his lumps. There's no doubt about that. But I think you saw enough flashes to be excited about what he can be in year 2, and he's going to be one of those starting outside corners. And what I appreciate, and I spent some time in Tennessee and talking to some people there about the things that they've tried to fill in on the defense and what they felt like they needed. I think that it was really specific, and I completely understand how they got there. So the 2 areas where if you look at the personnel that they added this offseason that was very intentional and very urgent was we want a Mike linebacker within this defense. When they lost Ernest Jones last year, it wasn't even just the quality of play from that position, but what they put on the Mike linebacker mentally in this defense. Just think about what they asked of Roquan Smith when Denard Wilson was in Baltimore. They lost that a little bit when Ernest Jones was gone. And so getting Cody Barton to be there and kind of be the centerpiece of communication for this team, I think was a priority for them. And they feel like they got that with Barton. And even from how his skill set fits into the defense sort of way, he's a little bit undersized. He's a sideline to sideline player. Well, you have Jeffrey Simmons and Trevondre Sweat in front of him. And so the hope is the weaknesses in his game matter a little bit less because of some of the other pieces that you have. And the other thing that was clearly a priority for them this offseason, even if they have that sort of beef on the interior, they were undersized on the edges last year. It was Harold Landry and Arden Key, and I don't think they liked how proficient they were at condensing certain runs and not getting pushed around on the edge. Well, you look at it, They signed Jihad Ward in free agency, and that's exactly what he can bring you. They signed Draymond Jones in free agency, who's a massive edge rusher, and that's exactly what he can bring you. He comes from a similar system after playing in Seattle last year with Mike McDonald, and then they drafted Femi Oluwadejo in the second round. He's a different sort of player just because he's played off the ball, and they do think there's some flexibility there. But right now, I think all they want him to be is, we want you to be a violent player off the edge, and we want to condense that space in ways that we couldn't last year. You combine that with a capable group of DBs, if they can get 80% of L'Jarius Sneed and the type of coaching you're talking about with Denard Wilson, and I truly do believe that this can be a defense that people are surprised by over the course of the season.
They feel like if they were the Chargers defense of this year, would that be that crazy?
I
Like the build feels similar. I do think the star players in Los Angeles are a little bit higher, so the ceiling is probably not as high, but like that style of defense where you're just choking other teams out, your zone coverage is really good. You're playing a lot of these like as sound of run defense as you can from too high, is probably the best way to put it. Like that they feel like they can be that kind of unit.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad comparison, actually. I think one of the reasons that the Chargers could get by with those sorts of boxes last year is because of what those interior players could do
Mhm.
against the run. And I think very clearly with Sweat and Simmons, the Titans do have those two sorts of guys. And Sebastian Joseph Day has been one of those guys. Like,
He's
he's just
solid.
been a good block eater in a lot of these systems over the last 4 or 5 years. And so I do think potentially they have the personnel to hold up as that kind of defense. I can get there with you. My answer to this is very simple. I'm excited to watch Cam Ward play football in the NFL.
I mean, dude.
Stylistically, he is a quarterback that I can easily get behind. The way that he wants to play, the aggressiveness that he plays with. And I just think that based on everything that I've heard, we talked a lot about Cam and about the Titans offense specifically on the Out of Nowhere Units show we did a couple weeks ago, where I do think that this is the type of offense that could sneak up on some people because of the quality of the offensive line and because of what the ambitions of the quarterback look like. He's going to be somebody that really does try stuff. And I think that style of quarterback, uh, that level of aggressiveness, I do think can reap benefits for you. And I think when you combine that with somebody that, based on everything that I was told about the acumen that he has and just the football intelligence, all the stuff that they're putting on him, I'm excited to watch this. Like you combine aggressiveness and smarts and spatial awareness and pocket mobility. Like he has all of those things. And so you've seen some of the flashes in the preseason. Like I can get there with this. I do want to watch what he looks like within this offense.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the acumen. One, he's a guy who played in so many different offenses. He played in 3 different offenses in college and was like barely a passing quarterback coming out of high school. So he's very clearly learned all of this stuff at a really high level, which to me is really interesting and speaks to what he's capable of. But I want to make sure that people get that he's going to throw interceptions and he's going to take bad sacks. And I think in a lot of cases, we ascribe that to the quarterback being an idiot. And that's fair because usually that is the case. But I do think with Cam Ward, he actually is an exceptionally smart player. It's just that because he plays so towing the line, like, can I really get away with this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? It looks really bad when it goes bad. And it's the same way that it can look dumb for Matthew Stafford or Jordan Love or some of those guys. And I think he definitely has that mentality to him. And especially as a rookie, there's probably going to be moments where it looks really dumb. But I think by the end of it, we're going to have enough moments where you see a lot of the brilliance and you're like, man, if I was a team looking for a young quarterback, that would be the type of guy I would love to be building around right now.
And I think when you look at his history and just like with some of the stuff he was asked to do in college and how spread out that world was for him, Brian Callahan is comfortable living in that world. And with Will Levis, we saw a little bit more under center play action, and they're going to do some of that stuff. He is comfortable doing some of the under center stuff. And so I don't think that's off the table, but I think being able to build in enough access throws, RPOs, just like making him comfortable when you need to make him comfortable. I think that there's going to be a blend where they're hoping to take advantage of the aggressiveness and the arm talent while also being able to build enough easy stuff for him early in his career that it should be harmonious if this thing kind of goes right.
Can I also say last thing to point out? Did you see his answer when he was asked about the fight with Jeffrey Simmons?
Yes.
Just
I
amazing. Jeff is strong as shit. An amazing answer to that question.
they've absolutely loved having him. And I think that he's just been one of those guys that sometimes you feel like the coaches and the people that you're talking to are posturing when it comes to how much they're enjoying coaching a guy or what sort of influence a highly drafted player has had. There's none of this with Cam Ward. Like it's all very genuine and to the point that like they've had to tell him like you do not need to come into the building at 5 a.m. Like this is not something you need to do. And he kind of just like that's what I do. But the problem is the other rookies have been doing it with him, and it's like those are long days for guys that are actually practicing all the
Yeah.
time. So they've had to pull him back in a couple different ways, and I think they'll have to pull him back as a quarterback, and that's a good thing. That's what I want out of my quarterbacks, and that's why I am excited to watch him play this year. The swing point for you with the 2025 Tennessee Titans is what?
We talked a little bit about how excited I am about this defense potentially, but the secondary is a little bit of a swing point. Like, we don't know how much we're really going to get out of L'Jarius Sneed at this point. Like, he's been banged up for a majority of the time that he's been a Tennessee Titan. The corners, like, I think given that he was a fifth-round pick and showed some stuff, we should be excited about Jarvis Brownlee, but that's another one of, like, what is the ceiling really? Like, is he just gonna be, like, a capable cornerback too for the rest of his career, or is there something more that he can tap into? I don't know. And then Roger McCreary is a solid player, but even as far as nickels go, he's a pretty undersized guy. Like, the whole thing about him coming out of college is that he has some of the shortest arms, like, ever, and I do think that that shows up sometimes, both in coverage and even sometimes in run defense. And then these safeties, you're trying to get by with like stopgap-ish vet in Xavier Woods. Amani Hooker's been there for a while. He's okay. It's hard to see like who is the true ceiling raiser. So kind of like we've talked about with some of these other units, they are shooting for we just have no weak links. Well, if Snead isn't who we think or one guy gets banged up, you could pretty quickly have like a bad weak link.
I also don't think Snead is who we think. Like if
Yeah.
you're expecting
Which is such a
all
shame because
pro level
he was
L'Jarius
awesome,
Sneed this
dude.
year, he was unbelievable the last time that we saw him at full strength with the Chiefs. If that's the L'Jarius Sneed that you're hoping for, I think you're probably going to be a little bit let down. I mean, he's just dealing the stuff he's had to deal with physically. I'm just not sure we're ever going to see that guy again. And so this is the area of the roster that is going to need an influx of talent over the next couple of years. I mean, this group, they were picking first overall this year, right? Like, there's a reason you're picking first overall. And I do think this is probably the group where you're kind of just holding on for dear life and seeing if you can get by. I will say, Kevin Winston is somebody as a third round pick that they are excited about. But when I was there early in camp, one of the reasons that he was not going to necessarily break into the lineup that early is because of how well Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods were playing. So it seems like the safety play might be solid enough. I think across the board, that's what you're hoping for here. Can it be solid enough?
Yeah, if everyone can just be solid, that's because if you get solid plus the way that Denard Wilson's going to call it, that's enough and we're cooking here.
The swing point for me, this is a very easy one. What is the offensive line for the Tennessee Titans? Obviously a ton of investments this year. And the Dan Moore thing, we've talked about it a lot this offseason. I think it was an easy thing for them to do. They knew that they were going to take Cam Ward by like the end of the combine. Like this is something where they knew. And so when they got to free agency, they understood we're going to have to solve this in free agency because if we're taking a quarterback number one overall, a starting left tackle was likely not going to be available to us at 33 or 34, wherever they were picking. So we have the money to do it. Let's make sure that we at least have an acceptable answer here. And then that allows us to go a couple different ways in the draft. And so that makes sense to me. And so that thought process and then being able to pay Zeitler and having that group now be something that you'd hope has no real weaknesses and potentially a couple defined strengths. Like Skoronski really did turn the corner in the back half of last season. JC Latham is undeniably talented. His weight is down this year. He's more comfortable on the right side. And then we'll see what happens with Lloyd Cushenberry. And coming back from an Achilles, you never know what the recovery period is going to look like for those types of guys. He's practicing. And he's not like full go back yet, but over the last week, he's been working in even to some of the team stuff. And the hope was to get him ready for week one. And it seems like we're going to get there. And so if this ends up becoming like the 8th best offensive line in the league after being like the 28th best offensive line in the league last year, I think this offense could be pretty good. If it ends up becoming the 16th best offensive line in the league, even with all these other investments, then I think it changes the calculus a little bit. But I'm open to the idea of this being like a definitive top 10 offensive line if all of this stuff breaks correctly.
Their best ball really could be like insanely good. And Cushenberry really is like to me, if I really had to hone it down to one guy who I think is a swing point here, it's probably Cushenberry. Like
The literal pivot, yeah.
yeah, the literal pivot player. I loved JC. Like I even thought JC Latham was kind of underrated last year, and then again he's moving back to his natural position. Skaronski's turned a corner. Dan Moore is what he is, but again, if he's your worst offensive lineman, that's probably fine. And then Zeitler has been just an unkillable man at the right guard position for forever. Cushenberry really is the one where it feels like there's a little bit more uncertainty coming off of the injury, but if you get a guy who is like that caliber of veteran center playing with again a quarterback who I think is as put together and smart as Cam Ward, it just feels like there would be such like the breathing room in that offense would be so much better. And that I think would go a really long way for again, a quarterback that is going to try a lot of stuff and might need a little bit of a calming presence at center in a guy like Lloyd Cushenberry.
What is keeping you up at night about the 2025 Tennessee Titans?
The edge room on like pure pass rushing downs scares me a little bit. Like I can see the vision in terms of okay, we want bigger guys so that we can get to more second and nines and we can condense the run with guys like Draymond Jones, Jihad Ward, and all that stuff. And I get that. And I do think Denard Wilson, even just irrespective of the talent that he has to work with, he does do a good job of mixing up some of his pressures and throwing some interesting stuff. But you don't really have anyone who moves me that much as a pass rusher right now. Like even Arden Key is cool when he's your third best edge rusher, but he is potentially their best guy right now. And I think that scares me a little bit. You don't know what you're going to get from the rookie. And then again, guys like Draymond Jones and Ward are really more there to be first and second down players. So I know that Jeffrey Simmons is does a lot by himself, but he can't do it by himself. And it does worry me a little bit what passing downs might look like.
It's totally fair. There is not like a true difference maker on the edge when it's 3rd and 8 for this team. The hope is that this can be a group that gets by with creativity
Mhm.
and like collective rush plans. And so I think a couple different things in that area. Arden Key last year, like couldn't play inside because they didn't have any bodies to play outside. And that's some of the best work that he's done as an NFL player. Like when you can put him as a spinner and you can have him working against guards, that's the best version we've ever seen of Arden Key. Last year, they didn't have the bodies on the edge to be able to do that. Like he had to play on the edge in those situations. Now, even if Draymond Jones isn't a dynamic pass rusher, Oladejo, both of those guys, at least you have some depth there where you can potentially get the best version of Arden Key because he's lining up in the right spots. And something else I thought was really interesting in talking to people there about the plan for that group as a whole. They've actually gotten to a place where the defensive tackles, and like the interior players and the outside linebackers, are now in one meeting room
Hmm.
because they felt that it was going to be a better way to make sure that all of the games, stunts, and some of the tweaks that they would do pre-snap based on certain things were really cohesive in a way that it might not have been last year. And that to me is the best example you can possibly get of a group that understands we need to be more than the sum of the parts here. Like we need to make sure that we're when it comes to games, stunts, everything else, we are rushing at a level that is not based on the individual talent of the players, but is based on how we're deploying our guys collectively.
If you're going to be a sum of greater than the sum of our parts pass rush unit, everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing and like be
Yes.
very in tune with that. So that makes total sense to me.
What's keeping me up at night about the Tennessee Titans? It's the pass catcher's not named Calvin Ridley. I mean that's where I am with this group. Tyler Lockett in 2025 on a $4 million deal, Van Jefferson, and then a couple guys that you drafted in the 4th round. I gotta see it. And I think the hope is by the end of the year that you can have DK as your slot guy. And I do think that there's probably a little bit more to him than I thought after looking at his draft profile. Like he's a
Mhm.
4.35 guy, but he's actually a little like thicker than some guys who are like that much of burners. Like he's like 6 foot 200. And one of the names that came up just in terms of like some of the skill sets with him was like Robert Woods. And Robert Woods, the fact that he can like bring some stuff as a blocker, as a slot guy. So I think they're excited about DK. And I do think they see a path for Ayamanor to eventually be like the X receiver of the future, maybe in the back half of this season. But we're talking about 4th round rookies here. And I think collectively, the reason I do think it's going to be better, even with the question marks, is that last year, there just was not a lot of collective speed from this group, period. And if you're using Tyler Lockett as like a vertical slot guy where you're not asking him to get off press coverage, you're not really asking him to throttle down, but you're just using him to kind of create space and you have two guys in DK and Iomanor that can roll a little bit, and you're creating more space for Calvin Ridley as the Z, I do think as a group, you can eventually get there, but the individual talent of the wide receiver core is making me a little bit itchy.
I think I'm mostly there with you. Like a lot of the rookies, even if you want to include like the tight end position with Gunnar Helm, it's literally all fourth round picks, and there's a chance
Yes.
that one of them hits for you by, early December, late November, whatever it is. But you're asking for a whole lot. I'm probably slightly more optimistic on the Tyler Lockett thing. Like I actually, with the way that Ward plays, I just feel like Lockett actually does make a lot of sense, and so I can get myself on there on that, but I do think you're asking for a whole lot of early day 3 picks at the other positions where pretty unlikely that one of those guys is like a true difference maker in year 1.
What do you watch in the first month of the season with the Tennessee Titans?
We did an entire show earlier this offseason about like was Brian Callahan the problem at all for the Titans offense last year? And I think we both kind of came to the conclusion that like I don't know if Brian Callahan is great, but he might be fine. And like the offense actually did look put together relative to a lot of their production last year. So I'm just really interested to see what his offense is going to look like now with a quarterback where I think you can put way more on his plate and be, I think, more of a spread team than they ever were last year or the year before with Will Levis, and an offensive line that is not constantly getting battered. So it feels like Callahan has so much more to work with now. And I just want to see what is the manifestation of all of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is an offense. We talked about it a lot, but the degree to which this group shot itself in the foot last year is absolutely horrifying. Like, it's just unlike any offense I can remember watching. So they ranked 24th in the NFL last season in EPA lost on sacks. If you combine that with the EPA lost on aborted snaps, which was the most in the NFL by a decent amount, and then the fact that they lost the second highest amount of EPA in the NFL on turnovers last year, like this is an offense that just couldn't get out of its own way. And I think some of that is the quarterback. Like, just remember Brian Callahan trying to emotionally process those early season Will Levis moments. Like, if this team can just not step on as many rakes offensively this year, if the quarterback can be functional and the offensive line can be good, I think that there's a chance that they're really surprising.
I think we're gonna do what counts as a successful season in a second. I think what like my joke answer for what is a successful season: don't have the Bengals game again. Like, don't be that team again. And I think a lot of that again would come down to like these little pieces on the offense just not consistently shooting themselves in the foot.
For me, what success looks like for this team, again, it's kind of big picture. I don't think the wins and losses matter that much. The same way that some of these other teams that drafted quarterbacks high have changed the narrative around them in the first season with that quarterback. The way that we think about Washington now, the way that we think about the Texans now. And I'm not asking Cam Ward to have the CJ Stroud rookie year or to have the Jaden Daniels rookie year, but this team has undergone a lot of changes over the last year or so. There's a new general manager of this team. There is a new quarterback of this team. They have a different leadership structure with Chad Brinker being there as like the president of football operations. For a long time, this team was a mess. Like, the way that it worked internally was a mess. And the way that it was structured didn't make a lot of sense. And there were competing motivations, and there was infighting, and there were people getting fired on a whim. It felt like one of the more dysfunctional organizations in the entire NFL. Can we get to a place by the end of this season where we don't think that anymore? Where we think that this is a team that feels in lockstep, they're moving in the correct direction, they're moving as a whole in that direction, and the people in these leadership spots, the general manager, the head coach, the quarterback, are guys that we can get excited about and we can put trust in. If that's the case and this team is 6-11, I don't give a shit. But if we get to that place with all the other stuff, I think that is a significant win for the Tennessee Titans.
If we get to this time next year and we're not even really talking about like what is the floor for this team, where we're not worried about like, oh my God, are they just going to be a 3-win team, like they can't play type of team? If we are completely moved on from that conversation, that is success.
I'm 100% with you. Thanks for watching the Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.